Picture this: a 9-year-old girl standing in the middle of one of the busiest airports in the country, holding an envelope of cash instead of a boarding pass, watching her own father walk through security without ever turning around. That is exactly where this story begins, and what happened over the following hours would end up changing the rest of my life. I was that little girl. My father had just told me there had been a small change of plans. His new wife and her 2 children were already waiting near the gate in matching vacation sweatshirts, laughing beside a pile of designer luggage. There was no seat for me on that flight. There never had been. He pressed an envelope into my hand, told me I was old enough to handle things on my own, and then he simply walked away. I stood there with my suitcase beside me, my phone battery dropping fast, and no key to get back into the house I was supposed to be leaving from with them. For almost 2 hours, I tried to look like I belonged in that airport while families walked past me holding hands. I had no idea that one phone call, the one I was too afraid to make, was about to unravel every single thing I had been told about the woman I thought never wanted me. What I also did not know, standing there frozen near the security line, was that by the time my father came home from his luxury vacation, my room would be completely empty. No clothes, no boxes, no sign that I had ever lived there at all, just a house key, a letter, and a thick stack of legal papers waiting for him on my bed. He believed he was teaching me a lesson about being mature and not making a scene in front of his new family. He had absolutely no idea that he was about to lose almost everything he had spent years building, and he never saw it coming until it was far too late to stop it. Watching from where? Please comment. My name is Emily Carter, and I was 9 years old when I learned that a plane ticket could decide who counted as family and who could be left behind. I stood frozen near the security checkpoint long after they had disappeared from sight. At 9, I did not understand custody arrangements, adult selfishness, or how someone could dress up abandonment and call it a life lesson. All I understood was that my father had walked away with his new family, and I was left standing there holding an envelope of cash I had no idea what to do with. I called him first. Once, twice, 5 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. Then a text came through. "Stop panicking. You're old enough to handle a ride home. Don't embarrass me." I stared at those words until the letters blurred together. My phone battery was already low because I had spent the whole morning taking pictures of my suitcase, my Disney sweatshirt, and the little travel journal I had planned to fill with happy memories. Now the battery icon glowed red, and the airport felt bigger with every passing minute. I dragged my suitcase over to a row of seats near a coffee stand and tried to look like I belonged there. Families kept walking past me. Parents holding their children's hands, mothers fixing ponytails, fathers carrying sleepy toddlers on their shoulders. Every time I saw one, my throat tightened. I wanted to scream that I was someone's child too. Instead, I sat there quietly because my father had spent years teaching me that asking for help made me dramatic. I counted the money in that envelope twice, then pushed it back inside because it felt dirty in my hands. It wasn't help. It was hush money. After nearly 2 hours, an airport employee with kind eyes stopped in front of me and asked where my grown-up was. At first I lied and said my dad was parking the car. She looked at my suitcase, then at my face, and her voice softened. "Honey, how long has he been parking?" That was when I broke down. The whole story came out in uneven pieces. The vacation, the envelope, the security line, the text messages. She walked me to an airport police desk and let me charge my phone behind the counter. An officer asked for my father's name, his phone number, and where we lived. I remember feeling ashamed, as if I were the one getting him in trouble, instead of admitting he had left me in trouble. The officer asked if there was another parent they could call. I shook my head automatically, because that was what I had always done. My father had told me for years that my mother chose her career over me. He said she loved boardrooms, money, and airplanes more than bedtime stories and school plays. Whenever I asked why she never came to see me, he would say, "Some people just aren't built to be parents, Emily." After hearing that enough times, I believed it. But while my phone charged, I scrolled through my contacts and saw a name I almost never touched. Mom. My finger hovered over it so long the screen dimmed. I was terrified she wouldn't answer. I was even more terrified she would answer and prove my father right. Finally, I pressed call. It rang twice before a woman's voice said my name so fast it sounded like she had been waiting years to say it. Emily. For a second, I forgot how to speak. Then I whispered, Dad left me at the airport. There was a sharp silence on the other end. Not a cold silence, not an annoyed one. The kind of silence that happens when someone's entire world stops moving. Then her voice came back, steady and urgent. Listen to me carefully. Find the nearest airport police officer and stay with them. Don't leave with anyone. Don't let your phone die. I'm coming. I said, You don't have to. She answered, I should have come a long time ago. 4 hours later, an officer walked me through a quiet corridor toward a private aviation terminal. I remember the glass doors opening, the cold night air, and a white jet waiting under bright lights. A woman stepped down the stairs before the crew had even finished. She looked nothing like the selfish stranger my father had described. She looked scared, breathless, and completely undone. When she saw me, she covered her mouth and started crying. Then she ran to me, dropped to her knees, and wrapped her arms around me so tightly I could feel her shaking. For the first time that day, I stopped trying to act mature. I cried like the 9-year-old I was in the worst moment of my life. One phone call had brought back the person I had been taught to fear, and I had no idea she was about to uncover years of lies. My mother did not scoop me up and disappear the way someone stealing a child might. That was the first thing that told me she was different from the story I had been given. She spoke to the airport police, signed a report, asked for the names of every employee who had helped me, and made sure the officer saved the text where my father told me not to embarrass him. She asked if the security cameras would show him handing me the envelope and walking into the checkpoint without me. The officer said, Yes, most likely. My mother nodded, as if every answer were another brick in a wall she had been waiting years to build. On the plane, I sat across from her under soft cabin lights, wrapped in a blanket I hadn't asked for, but desperately needed. She ordered warm food for me, though I could barely eat. I kept staring at her, searching for the careless woman my father had described. She noticed and didn't push me to talk. After a while, she said, I know you've been told things about me. I won't ask you to stop believing them tonight. Tonight, you only need to know you're safe. That made me cry again, because no one in my father's house had ever said anything like that to me. In his house, love came with rules. Be grateful. Be quiet. Fit in. Don't make his new wife uncomfortable. Don't remind anyone that he had a life before them. My mother told me her name was Diane Whitfield now, since she had taken back her maiden name after the divorce. She said she had fought for more time with me when I was little, but my father had better lawyers, more local influence, and a talent for making her look unstable because her work required travel. She admitted she had made mistakes. She had trusted court orders to protect a relationship that needed more than paper and believed that letters, gifts, and money would at least keep a door open. My father, it turned out, had locked that door and told me she was the one who had walked away. She didn't ask me to forgive her that night. She didn't try to make herself the hero. She only told me that whatever came next, she was not going to let another adult decide whether I was worth protecting. When we landed in Massachusetts, a black car drove us to a quiet neighborhood outside Boston. Her house was large but not cold. There were books on the tables, photographs in the hallway, blankets on the couches, and a room upstairs that stopped me in the doorway. It had pale green walls, a shelf of children's books, a stuffed rabbit on the bed, and unopened birthday gifts arranged by year. I recognized my own name on the tags. Emily, age 7. Emily, age 8. Emily, age 9. My knees went weak. She had kept them. All of them. My mother stood behind me and said, I sent some. I saved the rest when they came back unopened, or went unanswered. Your father told you I didn't want to send anything. I touched the oldest gift with trembling fingers and felt a strange anger rise up through the sadness. Not anger at her, but at every time I had stared at an empty mailbox and thought I was unwanted. Before sunrise, a family law attorney named Rachel Simmons arrived at the house with a laptop, a legal pad, and the calmest voice I had ever heard. She spoke gently to me, but when she turned to my mother, her words became sharp and precise. A 9-year-old left alone at a major airport. No confirmed transportation. No house key. Parent unreachable. Text evidence minimizing her distress. Possible misuse of funds meant for the child. We file for emergency custody in Illinois immediately. My mother looked at me before agreeing. She asked, "Emily, do you want to stay here while we sort this out?" No one had asked me what I wanted in so long that I didn't answer right away. Then I nodded. Rachel explained that my father could not simply show up and take me back because the court would be told exactly what had happened. She also said all communication needed to go through the lawyers until a judge decided what was safe. While my father was somewhere near the ocean, posting smiling photos from a luxury deck with his new family, my mother and Rachel were quietly gathering airport footage, police notes, text messages, travel records, and financial statements. I fell asleep that morning in a room that had been waiting for me for years. Downstairs, adults who actually cared whether I was safe were making the calls that would quietly take apart my father's perfect vacation before he even made it home. 10 days later, my father returned to Chicago, tanned, rested, and completely unprepared for the house he was walking into. I know what happened next because I pieced it together later from court records, from one of my former step-siblings, and from the voicemails he left once panic replaced his usual arrogance. He genuinely expected me to be there. That part still amazes me. He believed I would simply find a ride home, sit alone with my hurt feelings, and wait for him to return so he could lecture me about maturity. He believed the world worked that way because for years, everyone around him had let it. His new wife walked in first, carrying a designer tote bag and complaining about jet lag. Her daughter was showing her brother photos from the resort. My father dropped his luggage near the stairs and called my name, not with concern, but with irritation. "Emily, come down here. We need to talk." No answer. He went upstairs. My bedroom door stood open. The room was nearly empty. My clothes were gone. My school books were gone. The little nightlight I'd had since I was 6 was gone. The framed photo of me at my 2nd grade spelling bee was gone. The closet door hung open with bare hangers inside. Even the small box under my bed, where I kept birthday cards, old drawings, and a cracked plastic bracelet from kindergarten, had been taken. On the bed sat only my house key, a handwritten letter, and a thick envelope from my mother's attorney. My father picked up the legal papers first. That tells you everything you need to know about him, not the letter from his child, not the key. He read the papers, which meant he understood right away that I was not coming back. His wife came to the doorway and asked what was wrong. Then she saw the heading on the court papers, my mother's name, and the words, "Emergency Temporary Custody." Her face changed so fast that her daughter stopped smiling. "What did you do, Marcus?" she whispered. He snapped that it was nothing, just a misunderstanding, just my mother being vindictive. But his hands were shaking as he read. The papers listed the airport police report, the request for security footage, the text messages, the fact that I was 9 years old, and the claim that funds meant for my care may have been misused. That last part made his wife step back, as if the paper itself were contagious. Her entire public image was built around being part of a loving blended family. She posted matching outfits, vacation reels, Sunday brunch photos, captions about grace and gratitude. A child left behind at an airport did not fit her brand. Her son looked from her to my father and asked, "Did you actually leave her there?" No one answered him. My letter turned out shorter than I expected when I finally wrote it. I had imagined pages of anger, but when the moment came, I only needed a few sentences. I wrote that I had waited for him to turn around. I wrote that I had believed him when he said my mother didn't care. I wrote that he had taught me a lesson, just not the one he meant to. He taught me that a father could stand close enough to touch my shoulder and still choose to abandon me. I ended the letter by saying I was safe, that I was with my mother, and that I would not speak to him unless a judge and a therapist agreed it was okay. That was when he started calling. First me, then my mother, then Rachel, then me again. I didn't answer. My mother didn't answer. Rachel's office sent one message: all contact regarding Emily must go through counsel. My father hated that. He hated not being able to talk his way out of consequences. He left voicemails that started soft and ended furious. "Sweetheart, "This has gotten out of hand." Then, "Your mother is using you." Then, "You have no idea what you're doing." Then, "Put Diane on the phone, now." I listened to one and stopped. His voice didn't sound like a man grieving his daughter. It sounded like a man furious that his property had been moved without his permission. Meanwhile, his wife began quietly deleting her vacation posts, but screenshots had already been saved by friends, by school parents, by people who had seen her captions about a dream family getaway. The dream was starting to crack, and for the first time in my life, my father could not force me to stand inside the wreckage and call it home. The first hearing was the first time I saw my father again after the airport. I sat beside my mother in a courthouse conference room, wearing a navy dress she had bought only after asking whether I liked it. My feet didn't reach the floor, and I kept swinging them until Rachel gently rested a hand over mine and told me I was allowed to be nervous. My father walked in with an expensive attorney and the same expression he probably used when employees disappointed him. He tried to smile at me, as if we shared some private understanding. I looked down at my hands. His new wife came with him, polished and pale, her wedding ring flashing every time she adjusted her sleeve. She didn't look at me at all. The hearing opened with his lawyer calling the airport incident a regrettable communication breakdown. He said my father had believed I had a safe ride home. He said I was a bright, capable child. He said my father never intended any harm. Rachel let him finish. Then she opened a folder. The first item was the airport police report. It stated that a minor child had been found alone for several hours after her custodial parent boarded a flight with the rest of the family. The second item was my father's text. "Stop panicking. You're old enough to handle a ride home. Don't embarrass me." The judge read it twice. The room went very quiet. Then came the footage. I couldn't watch all of it, but I saw enough. My father leaning toward me, his hand passing me the envelope, his wife waiting impatiently near security, the four of them walking through the checkpoint, and me left standing alone, still watching long after they were gone. My father's lawyer tried to argue that there had been money set aside for transportation. Rachel asked for proof of a scheduled car. There was none. She asked whether I had a house key. My father said he had assumed I did. Rachel then showed a text from that same morning where I had written, "I left my key in my desk since we're all traveling together, right?" He had replied with a thumbs up. The judge's expression hardened. My father shifted in his seat, but Rachel wasn't finished. She presented records from my mother showing years of support payments, gift receipts, returned letters, and deposits into an education account under my name. Then she showed the withdrawals from that same account, not for tuition, not for medical care, not for school supplies, but for airline upgrades, resort deposits, a stylist's invoice for family vacation photos, and a chartered boat package in the Bahamas. My father's wife whispered something to him. He didn't respond. The judge asked one question that seemed to cut through every excuse he had. Why was a child's education fund used to pay for a luxury trip the child was excluded from? My father said it was complicated. It was the weakest thing I had ever heard him say. After that, his excuses grew uglier. He claimed my mother was unstable. Rachel produced years of messages from my mother asking to speak with me, all either unanswered or blocked. He claimed I was emotionally fragile and easily influenced. Rachel said simply, "She's 9. The question isn't whether she's fragile. The question is why her father chose to leave her alone in an airport." His wife then made the mistake of speaking up. She said this had all been blown out of proportion, and that I had always struggled to accept the new family. Her words were smooth, but they carried the same message I had heard in her house for years, that I was the problem. The judge asked her directly whether she had known, before arriving at the airport, that I was not part of the final travel plan. She hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Her own attorney, who had come only to observe, leaned forward and quietly advised her not to answer any further. That was the moment I watched fear replace performance. She was no longer worried about me ruining a vacation. She was worried about being tied to what my father had done. Rachel then presented one last set of documents, screenshots from my father's public business page, where he had recently given a speech about leadership, loyalty, and family values. In one caption, he had written that success meant nothing if a man couldn't protect the people under his own roof. The judge didn't comment on it, but my father's face turned red. The hypocrisy was no longer private. It was written in his own words. The judge granted temporary physical custody to my mother, ordered that any visitation be supervised, required my father to submit financial records connected to my support and education funds, and warned him that contacting me outside of approved channels would damage his case. My father looked stunned, as if consequences were a foreign language and no one had ever handed him subtitles. As we left, he stepped toward me and said my name. Rachel moved between us before my mother even had to. "Not today," she said. His face flushed with anger, but he stopped. That was the first time I ever saw an adult tell my father no and make it stick. In the parking lot, my mother knelt in front of me and asked if I was okay. I wasn't. Not yet. But I remember looking back at the courthouse doors and understanding something important. My father had abandoned me in public, lied about it in private, and expected the world to simply believe his version, because it always had before. This time, the cameras had seen him, the records exposed him, the judge had heard him, and I no longer had to carry the truth alone. Life in Boston did not magically fix everything. That would make for a cleaner story, but it wouldn't be a true one. For the first few weeks, I woke up every morning afraid someone had changed their mind. I packed my backpack too carefully. I asked permission before eating a snack. I kept my shoes by the door in case I needed to leave quickly. My mother noticed all of it, but she never once made me feel ashamed for it. She just kept showing up. Breakfast at the same time every day, school visits whenever I felt ready, and therapy every Tuesday with a woman named Dr. Bennett, who told me that children often blame themselves because blaming the adults feels too frightening. I did blame myself. I wondered if I had been too quiet, too needy, too much like my mother, and not enough like the family my father had wanted. Dr. Bennett helped me set those thoughts down somewhere outside myself. She told me, "Emily, being abandoned tells you something about the person who left. It doesn't tell you anything about the child who was left behind." I didn't believe her right away, but I never forgot it. My new school was smaller than the one back in Chicago, and everyone there already seemed to know how to play lacrosse, pronounce French pastries, and talk about summer camps I had never even heard of. I felt like an outsider carrying the wrong lunchbox. But a girl named Hannah asked if I wanted to sit with her, and when I told her I might be boring, she said, "Boring people never admit they're boring." That made me laugh for the first time in days. Slowly, Boston started to feel real. My room became my room. My mother learned I hated mushrooms and loved pancakes. I learned she drank too much coffee whenever she was nervous, and that she had kept every school photo of me she could get her hands on, even the blurry ones. We weren't instantly close. Some days I was angry that she hadn't saved me sooner. Some nights she cried after she thought I was asleep, but she never once asked me to comfort her about it. She saved that for her own therapist, which taught me something important about healthy adults. They don't make children responsible for carrying their guilt. My father requested supervised visits once the court ordered them. The first one took place in a family center with beige walls, plastic toys, and a counselor sitting nearby with a clipboard. He brought gifts, too many gifts. A tablet, a bracelet, a stuffed animal bigger than my old suitcase. I looked at all of it and felt nothing. He said he missed me. He said the whole situation had turned into a nightmare. He said my mother and her lawyer had twisted a family matter into a legal attack. The counselor asked if he wanted to say anything about what had happened at the airport. He sighed and said, "I'm sorry everything got so out of control." That sentence stuck with me because it wasn't really an apology. It was a complaint dressed up to look like one. He was sorry about the consequences, not about the choice he had made. After that visit, I told my mother I didn't want another one for a while. She said, "Okay, just okay." No pressure, no speech about forgiveness. Meanwhile, my father's life began falling apart in ways he couldn't hide. His company had been negotiating a major partnership with a hotel group that built its brand around family-centered luxury travel. When the story reached the wrong board member, the partnership stalled, and then it disappeared entirely. His wife's online followers noticed she had quietly deleted her vacation posts, and someone from our old school mentioned that I hadn't been on the trip because I had been left at the airport. The internet did what it always does. It took a perfect picture and zoomed straight into the crack running through it. Sponsors began pulling away from her lifestyle page, and the comments filled up with questions she had no way to answer. Her daughter messaged me months later from a new account. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I knew it was wrong." I didn't reply right away, but I didn't hate her either. She had been a child too, older than me, but still trapped inside the choices of the adults around her. My father's wife eventually filed for separation. Court records later showed she wanted financial protection from any investigation into my education fund. The woman who had once smiled while I was left behind now wanted distance from the man who had done it. My father had spent his life building an image of success, generosity, and control. But control is fragile when it depends on everyone staying quiet. He lost primary custody. He was ordered to repay the misused funds. He lost the business deal. He lost the invitations to speak at leadership events where he used to stand on stage and talk about integrity. He lost friends who had repeated his version of the divorce for years without ever once asking for mine. He lost the family image he had chosen over me. And most importantly, he lost the right to decide what my own story meant. It took years before I could tell this story without feeling the airport floor under my shoes again. Trauma works strangely that way. You can be perfectly safe in a warm kitchen and still feel yourself pulled straight back to the exact second someone walked away, just because a boarding announcement plays in a movie. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning that the memory didn't get to be my whole identity. My mother and I built a life together slowly, with honesty instead of pretending. She apologized more than once, but the apology that mattered most wasn't dramatic at all. It happened on an ordinary Thursday while we were folding laundry. She said, "I should have fought harder before the airport ever happened. I can't change that now, but I will never again let another adult make you feel unreachable." I believed her, because by then she had already proven it in 100 small ways. She showed up to school meetings. She asked before posting any photo of me. She listened when I told her I was angry. She never punished me for loving her and resenting her at the same time. That's what real repair actually looks like. Not one big speech, but 100 quiet choices, made over and over. My father kept trying to reach me for years, sometimes through approved letters, sometimes through relatives, sometimes with apologies that almost sounded real until they curved back around to himself. "I lost everything after that day," he wrote once. I remember reading that line and thinking, no, you lost everything after your choices finally became visible to everyone else. I didn't answer most of his letters. That boundary wasn't revenge, it was protection, and there's a real difference between the two. Revenge tries to keep you tied to the person who hurt you. Protection lets you walk forward with your own future still in your hands. By the time I reached college, I understood that my story wasn't rare enough. Too many children get treated like luggage in adult conflicts, passed around, hidden, used, blamed, or ignored until they learn to make themselves small. I studied social work and child advocacy because I wanted those children to be heard before they ever had to scream to be noticed. Later, I worked with family court programs that train adults to recognize emotional abandonment, not just physical danger. I told judges, counselors, and parents something I wish someone had told me when I was 9. A child can be fed, dressed, and enrolled in school and still be deeply unsafe if the adults around her teach her that love depends on convenience. Real education isn't only what children learn sitting in classrooms. It's also what adults teach them through protection, honesty, and consistency. Painful places can teach valuable lessons, but no child should ever have to be wounded just to become wise. My father paid a price that looked satisfying from the outside. His second marriage ended. His company survived, but it never fully recovered its old reputation. The speeches about putting family first disappeared from his public profile. People who once admired him began speaking about him carefully, almost like his name now came with a warning label attached. But the deeper consequence was quieter than any of that. He became someone I could remember without ever needing to go back to him. I did forgive him, in the only way that made sense to me. I simply stopped letting his failure decide how much love I deserved. I did not invite him back into my life. Those two things can exist together. Forgiveness isn't a door you're required to reopen. Sometimes it's simply the lock you finally stop checking. When I think about that airport now, I don't only see the moment he left. I see the officer who believed me. I see the woman at the desk who let me charge my phone. I see my mother running down the steps of that jet with fear and love written all over her face. I see a little girl who thought asking for help would prove she was weak, and I want to kneel down beside her and tell her the truth. Calling for help was the bravest thing she had ever done. Family isn't proven by a shared last name, matching vacation photos, or who stands beside you when life is easy. Family is proven by the people who come when your voice shakes, who protect you even when it costs them something, and who tell you the truth even when a lie would have been far more comfortable. Blood can explain where you came from, but it can never excuse who chose to abandon you. Children don't exist to protect adult egos. They deserve safety, consistency, and a love that doesn't disappear the moment it reaches a security checkpoint. If you have ever had to choose between a familiar pain and a love that arrived late but arrived honestly, I hope you know this. Leaving what hurts you is not betrayal. Asking for help is not weakness, and the people who failed to value you do not get the final word on what you're worth. My father left me at an airport so he could take a luxury trip with his new family. But one phone call taught me that being left behind isn't always the end of the story. Sometimes, it's only the first step toward finally being found. This story is shared for its emotional and educational value. Sometimes people step back from your life not because they stopped caring, but because they finally understood that real caring should never come at the cost of enduring endless emotional harm.